The depths of the obsidian trench held secrets that sunlight would never touch. Here, where the water pressed heavy and cold against ancient stone, Mira had made her refuge. The other merfolk called this place cursed, a fitting home for one they considered the same. She moved through the darkness with practiced ease, her silver tail cutting through the water like a blade through silk. The bioluminescent markings along her arms and sides provided the only light she needed, casting an ethereal blue glow across the cavernous walls. Once, those markings had been a source of pride. Now they were just another reminder of what she'd lost. Omega. The word still tasted bitter, even unspoken. In the rigid hierarchy of the mare clans, Omegas were supposed to be cherished, protected, bonded to powerful alphas who would treasure them. Mira had believed that once. She'd believed in Torin's promises, in his touch, in the future he'd painted with silver words. She'd been a fool. Her hand unconsciously traced the scars along her ribs, not physical wounds, but marks only another Mer could see. Rejection scars. When Torin had cast her aside for a beta from a more prestigious clan, the bond he'd half formed with her had shattered, leaving these phantom marks that proclaimed her abandonment to anyone who looked. The clan had turned away from her then. A rejected Omega was seen as flawed, unlucky, tainted. So she'd left. Better to live in the shadows than endure their pitying stares and whispered judgments. A distant rumble rolled through the water, making the walls of her cavern tremble. Mira paused, her fins flaring instinctively. Storm. The surface world was churning, violent and angry. She should stay deep, stay hidden. Surface storms were none of her concern, but something tugged at her, an inexplicable pull toward the chaos above. She tried to ignore it, returning to the luminescent kelp she'd been tending in the small garden that supplemented her solitary diet. The pull intensified, becoming almost painful. With a frustrated click of her tongue, Mira propelled herself upward through the trench. She told herself she was just curious, just checking to ensure the storm wouldn't disturb her sanctuary. She told herself it meant nothing. She was lying. King Aldrich Theron stood at the helm of the small vessel, rain lashing his face as the sea rose in mountainous swells around him. He should have been in his palace, surrounded by guards and advisors. He should have been safe behind walls of stone and politics. He'd never felt more alive. "Your Majesty, we need to turn back." Marcus, his most trusted guard, and the only person who knew of this mad venture, struggled to keep his footing on the pitching deck. "There is no back!" Aldrich shouted over the howling wind. "Only through." It had started 6 months ago, this restlessness. Every smile in his court felt false. Every word of counsel seemed calculated. Every potential mate his advisors paraded before him reeked of ambition rather than genuine affection. He was the Alpha King, the most powerful ruler in 5 generations, and he had never felt more hollow. So he'd planned this escape. 1 week, disguised as a common sailor, to sail beyond his kingdom's borders and find, what? Truth? Authenticity? He wasn't entirely sure. He only knew he couldn't breathe in that gilded cage anymore. The storm had other plans. A wave as tall as the palace walls rose before them, blocking out the sky. Aldrich grabbed for the mast, but the world tilted sickeningly. Wood splintered with a sound like breaking bones. Cold water slammed into him, driving the air from his lungs. Then he was under, tumbling in the darkness, the surface already lost. His alpha strength meant nothing here. The ocean had no interest in his authority or his bloodline. His lungs burned. His limbs grew heavy. Strange, he thought with detached calm, that it would end like this. Not in battle or assassination, but swallowed by the indifferent sea. Something brushed against him in the darkness. Soft, smooth, impossibly warm in the frigid water. Arms wrapped around his chest from behind, and suddenly he was moving, rising toward a surface he could no longer see. His last conscious thought was of silver light and the scent of night-blooming jasmine, impossible this far from shore. Mira dragged the human into the hidden sea cave with trembling arms. She shouldn't have done this. Every instinct screamed at her to let the ocean take him, to return to her depths and forget she'd ever felt that terrible pull. But she'd hauled him onto the narrow shelf of rock at the cave's edge anyway, her hands shaking as she pressed against his chest, forcing water from his lungs the way she'd seen healers do long ago. Once. Twice. He coughed violently, salt water spilling from his mouth as he gasped for air. Mira scrambled back into the water, keeping only her head above the surface, her body concealed in shadow. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What had she done? Humans were forbidden, taboo. Contact with them had been outlawed for generations after the last war between land and sea. The man rolled onto his side, coughing and retching. Even waterlogged and half-drowned, something about him commanded attention. He was tall, she could tell even with him horizontal, and built like a warrior, all lean muscle and coiled strength, dark hair plastered to his skull, and as he finally managed to sit up, she caught a glimpse of storm-gray eyes that seemed to pierce the cave's darkness. "Hello?" His voice was rough, abraded by salt water. "Is someone there? I heard something. Someone saved me." Mira remained silent, her fingers gripping the rocks beneath the water's surface. He turned his head, scanning the darkness. "Please, I owe you my life. At least let me thank you." Against her better judgment, she spoke. "You should rest. You nearly died." He froze at the sound of her voice, then turned toward her so quickly she almost dove under. But she held her ground. Or her water, rather. "You saved me," he said, and there was wonder in his voice. "I felt you pulled me from the depths. The storm will pass by dawn," Mira said, keeping her tone cold, distant. "You can leave then. There's a fishing village 3 miles north along the coast." "Wait." He moved toward the water's edge, and she flinched back. He stopped immediately, holding up his hands. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to frighten you. What's your name?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me. You saved my life. Then live it, and forget this happened." But even as she said it, she knew something had shifted. That pull she'd felt, drawing her to the surface. It hadn't faded when she'd rescued him. If anything, it had intensified, a golden thread connecting her heart to this stranger's chest. No, it couldn't be. Fate couldn't be that cruel. "My name is Aldrich," he said softly. "I'm a sailor. Or I was. I think my ship is kindling now." A sailor. The lie was obvious. Everything about him screamed nobility, from his bearing to the quality of the signet ring he absently turned on his finger. But Mira said nothing. She understood the need for concealment. "Mira," she heard herself say, and cursed inwardly. Why had she given him her name? Mira. The way he said it, like a prayer or a promise, made something in her chest tighten painfully. "Thank you, Mira, for my life." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant rumble of thunder and the lap of water against stone. "Why won't you come closer?" he asked finally. "Are you injured? I know some field medicine." "I'm fine." She paused, then added, I prefer the shadows." Something in his expression shifted, softening. "I understand that. Wanting to hide from the world. I've felt that way for a long time." The unexpected empathy in his voice nearly undid her. She forced steel into her tone. "Sleep. Recover. Leave at dawn. Will you be here? When I wake?" She should say no. She should disappear into the depths and never return to this cave. Perhaps. It was as much of a promise as she could make. Aldrich smiled then, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to devastating. "Then I'll dream of silver light and jasmine, and hope they're not just fever visions." He lay back on the stone, exhaustion finally claiming him. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Mira remained in the water, watching him from the shadows, her hand pressed against her chest where that impossible golden thread seemed to pulse with warmth. She was in terrible danger. Not from him, though he was human, though he was forbidden, though discovering her would mean exile or worse. The danger was simpler and more terrifying, somewhere between the drowning and the rescue, between the storm and the shelter. Her damaged Omega heart had recognized him. Alpha. Not just any Alpha. Her Alpha. And that was a fate worse than any scar. 3 nights had passed since the storm, and Aldrich found himself returning to the hidden cave like a man possessed. He told Marcus he needed time alone to recover, to think. His guard had been suspicious but loyal enough not to question his king's commands. The truth was simpler and more complicated. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Mira, the woman, if she was a woman, who'd saved him and then vanished into shadow and water. He'd caught only glimpses, silver hair that seemed to glow with its own light, eyes the color of deep ocean trenches, skin that shimmered when the moonlight caught it just right. And always, always, she remained in the water, never venturing onto the rocks where he could see her fully. He suspected what she was. The old legends spoke of merfolk, though most dismissed them as sailors' tales and drunken fantasies. But Aldrich had felt those impossibly strong arms pull him through the depths. He'd seen the way she moved through water like it was air. The question wasn't what she was. The question was why his alpha instincts screamed at him every moment he was away from this cave. "You came back." Her voice drifted from the darkness, and his heart leapt traitorously in his chest. "I did." He settled onto the rocks, keeping a respectful distance from the water's edge. He'd learned that much. Sudden movements made her retreat. "I thought perhaps you'd want to know I survived the journey to the village, that your rescue wasn't in vain. I can see you survived." There was amusement in her tone now, a warmth that hadn't been there that first night. "You're sitting in my cave, after all." "Your cave? I've claimed it. Finders keepers, as you humans say." Aldrich smiled into the darkness. "Then I'm trespassing. Should I pay rent? Tell me a story." She emerged slightly from the shadows, and moonlight streaming through the cave's opening caught her face. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Ethereal, otherworldly, and profoundly sad. "Tell me about the surface world. About your life there." The lie he'd prepared, tales of a simple sailor's existence, died on his lips. Something about her, about this moment, demanded truth, or at least a version of it. "I'm trapped," he said instead, "in a life that was chosen for me before I could speak. Every day is a performance, every word calculated, every smile measured. People see what they want to see. Power, authority, strength, but they don't see me. I'm not sure anyone has in years." Silence. Then softly, "I understand that. Being seen, but not known. Or worse, being known for the worst moment of your life and nothing else. What happened to you?" The question escaped before he could stop it. "You said you prefer the shadows. Why?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. "I trusted someone once. An alpha. He made promises, began to form a bond with me. In my world, that's sacred. A bond is supposed to be forever." Aldrich's hands clenched involuntarily. He broke it. He found someone better. Someone from a more prestigious family. Someone without the complications that came with me. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. When an alpha rejects an omega after starting a bond, it leaves marks. Not physical ones, but they're visible to our kind. They're proof of my failure, my inadequacy. So I left. Better to live alone than endure their pity. Rage, hot and protective, surged through Aldrich. His alpha nature roared to life, demanding he find this male who'd hurt her and make him pay. But beneath the anger was something deeper, an aching need to heal those wounds, to show her she was anything but inadequate. "He was a fool," Aldrich said, his voice rougher than intended, "and unworthy of you. You don't know me. I know you risked yourself to save a stranger. I know you have a garden of luminescent kelp in the depths. I saw it when you were pulling me up. I know you try to sound cold, but your voice softens when you think I might be hurting. I know enough." Another long silence. Then she moved closer, close enough that he could see the faint blue bioluminescent markings tracing patterns along her arms and collarbone, close enough that he could see the tears on her cheeks. "You shouldn't come back here," she whispered. "This is forbidden. If my people knew, then we won't tell them." He extended his hand, palm up, an offering. "Stay in the water if you need to. Keep your secrets. But please, let me keep coming back." She stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her fingers against his palm. Her skin was cool and impossibly soft, and at the contact, something electric passed between them. A recognition that went soul deep. Aldrich's alpha senses exploded with certainty. Mine. Mate. Protect. From the way her eyes widened, her pupils dilating, he knew she felt it too. "This is a mistake," she breathed, but she didn't pull away. "Probably," he agreed, "but I've been living carefully my whole life. Maybe it's time for a mistake." A week passed in stolen moments. Aldrich would return each night, and they would talk for hours, about everything and nothing. She told him about the ocean's depths, about politics among the Mer clans that sounded disturbingly similar to his own court's intrigues. He told her about his travels, about the burden of expectations, carefully editing out any details that might reveal his true identity. Marcus was growing suspicious. "You're neglecting your duties, Aldrich. We've been gone nearly 3 weeks. The council will start to question. Let them question." Aldrich adjusted his cloak, preparing for another night at the cave. "I'm learning more about truth and loyalty in these weeks than I have in years at court." "And what truth have you learned? That you're falling for someone who won't even let you see her fully, who disappears every time you get too close." The words hit harder because they were accurate, but Aldrich couldn't explain the pull he felt, the certainty that Mira was important in ways that transcended logic. "She's been hurt," he said quietly. "She needs time. And when we have to return? When your identity is inevitably revealed? What then?" Aldrich had no answer. That night he found Mira already waiting, sitting on the rocks with her tail, and he could finally admit what he'd known from the start: she had a tail, dipped in the water. Moonlight painted her silver scales with opalescent hues. "You're letting me see you," he observed, his heart thundering. "You've seen me every night." "Not like this." He moved slowly closer, giving her time to retreat if she wished. She didn't. "You're beautiful, Mira, like living starlight." She looked away, but he caught the faint flush on her cheeks. Flattery from a handsome stranger. How dangerous. Is that what I am? A stranger. "I don't know what you are." She turned back to him, and her eyes held a vulnerability that made him ache. "I feel drawn to you in ways that terrify me. My Omega instincts recognize you as Alpha, and that should be impossible. We're not even the same species. Does it matter? What we are. It should. It will. Eventually." She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with heartbreaking gentleness. "You're someone important, aren't you? I see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak of duty and expectation. Whatever you're running from, it will find you." He caught her hand, pressing it more firmly against his face. "Then let's have this moment, however long it lasts." She leaned forward, and he thought she might kiss him. Instead, she pressed her forehead to his, her breath mingling with his own. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I survived being broken once. I don't think I could survive it again. I would never." "You don't know that. Neither of us knows what's coming." But she stayed there, forehead to forehead, their connection deepening with each shared breath. Aldrich felt the phantom sensation of a bond beginning to form, something he'd never experienced before despite his title and status. Every Alpha was supposed to find their Omega eventually, but he'd begun to think himself broken, incapable of that connection. Now he knew he'd simply been waiting for her. Beneath the waves, far from the cave where an Omega and an Alpha built something fragile and precious, other forces were stirring. Torin, the Alpha who'd rejected Mira, swam through the council chambers with barely contained fury. She's been seen, near the surface night after night. Elder Cassandra, her scales dulled with age, but her eyes still sharp, regarded him coolly. "And why does this concern you? You cast her aside, if I recall. She's consorting with a human." The words fell like stones. "Breaking our most sacred laws." The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Contact with humans was forbidden after the last war, when human nets and human greed had nearly driven the Mir clans to extinction. "Are you certain?" Elder Thrace demanded. "I've had her followed. Every night she meets with a human male in a cave north of the Obsidian Trench. They're close." Torin's lip curled. "She brings shame to our kind." "She's already exiled," another council member pointed out. "What more can we do?" "Execute her for treason," Torin said flatly. "Or bring her back to face judgment. Either way, this ends." Cassandra studied Torin with ancient knowing eyes. "You rejected her, cast her out, and now you want to punish her for finding comfort elsewhere? This sounds more like wounded pride than righteous justice. This is about our laws. This is about your ego." Cassandra's voice cracked like a whip. "Nevertheless, the law is clear. She will be summoned. If she refuses to return and renounce the human, she will be declared an enemy of the clans." Meanwhile, on land, similar machinations were unfolding. Lord Castellan paced his chambers, a letter clenched in his fist. 3 weeks. The king has been absent for 3 weeks, and you tell me he's still playing sailor near the coast. My sources say he returns to the same location every night. His spy confirmed. A sea cave. He remains there for hours, alone. Not alone, Castellan corrected, his mind racing. No one spends hours in a cave by themselves. He's meeting someone he doesn't want the court to know about. This was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. King Aldrich, the unshakable Alpha King, had a secret, and secrets were weapons. Find out who or what he's meeting. Use whatever resources necessary. And Theon, he fixed his spy with a cold stare. Be discreet. The king must not know we're watching. If Aldrich had a weakness, Castellan would exploit it. The throne was too valuable a prize to let slip away. Aldrich arrived at the cave to find Mira already on the rocks, her tail abandoned for legs. He'd never seen her with legs before, hadn't known she could transform. She wore a simple dress of woven kelp that left her shoulders bare, showing the bioluminescent markings that traced her skin. She stood when she saw him, and the anguish on her face stopped him cold. Mira, what's wrong? They know. Her voice shook. My people know about you, about us. I've been summoned to the council. Cold dread settled in his stomach. What will they do? Give me a choice. Return and never see you again, or be declared an enemy and hunted. She wrapped her arms around herself. They'll kill me, Aldrich. Or worse, lock me away where I can never reach the surface. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, pulling her against his chest. She felt perfect there, like she'd been made to fit against him. Then don't go back. Stay with me. I can protect you. How? You're a sailor with no home, no resources. You can't fight the entire ocean. She pulled back enough to look up at him, tears streaming down her face. And I can't ask you to. This was always going to end badly. I knew it, and I let myself hope anyway. There has to be another way. There isn't. She pushed against his chest, trying to create distance, but he held firm. This was a fantasy, a beautiful dream, but it's over. You need to go back to your life, and I need to. I need to disappear. Go deeper. Somewhere they'll never find me. No. The word came out as a growl, his alpha nature surging. I won't let you exile yourself to darkness because of me. Then what? What do you suggest, sailor? There was bitter emphasis on the last word. Because unless you're secretly a king with enough power to negotiate peace between land and sea, we're out of options. The truth rose in his throat, desperate to be spoken. But fear held it back. Fear that his identity would shatter what they'd built, that she'd see the crown instead of the man. Before he could respond, Mira stiffened, her head turning toward the water. Someone's coming. You need to leave. Now. I'm not leaving you. Please. She gripped his arms, her fingers digging in with desperate strength. If they find you here, they'll kill you. Go. I'll find a way to contact you, I promise. Mira, go. The fear in her eyes decided him. He pressed a quick, fierce kiss to her forehead, the first time he'd dared touch her that way, then ran toward the cave's landward exit. Behind him, he heard the splash of water, voices speaking in a language of clicks and whistles he couldn't understand. He heard Mira's voice responding, strong and defiant despite her fear, and he heard the name that made his blood run cold. King Aldrich. They knew. Somehow, they knew who he was. He'd run out of time, and so had she. As Aldrich emerged into the night, one thought consumed him. He would not lose her. Not to the ocean's laws, not to the court's politics, not to fate itself. Whatever it took, whoever he had to become, he would find a way. The Alpha King would claim his Omega, and heaven help anyone who tried to stop him. Mira faced the council envoys with her chin raised, refusing to show the fear coursing through her veins. 3 warriors floated before her in the cave, their expressions ranging from disgust to pity. Torin hung back in the shadows, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. You don't deny it? Captain Nereus demanded, his scarred face impassive. You've been consorting with a human. Repeatedly. Intimately. I saved a drowning man. I spoke with him. I committed no crime. You formed a bond with him. Torin surged forward, unable to contain himself any longer. I can see it starting, Mira. The golden threads. You're bonding with a human. The other warriors exchanged alarmed glances. A bond was sacred, yes, but a bond with a human. That was abomination. And what business is it of yours? Mira shot back, her own anger rising. You rejected me, Torin. You have no claim on who I bond with or don't. He's not just any human. Nereus pulled out a waterproof scroll, unrolling it to reveal a detailed drawing. Aldrich's face stared back at her, rendered in official portrait style, with a crown on his head and royal regalia on his shoulders. He's King Aldrich Theron, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, the same kingdom that warred against us 50 years ago, the same bloodline that massacred our people. The cave seemed to tilt around Mira. King. He was a king. All his talk of duty and expectation, of performances and calculated words, it hadn't been metaphor. He'd been lying to her from the start, just like Torin had, just like everyone always did. I didn't know, she whispered, hating how weak her voice sounded. Ignorance doesn't absolve you. Nereus's expression softened slightly. Mira, I don't want to do this, but the law is clear. You must renounce him publicly before the full council, or you'll be declared enemy of the clans. And if she refuses? A new voice asked from the cave's entrance. Everyone turned. Aldrich stood there, no longer dressed in simple sailor's clothes, but in the leather and steel befitting a warrior king. His traveling cloak bore the silver wolf emblem of his house, and authority radiated from him like heat. He looked nothing like the vulnerable man she'd pulled from the sea. This was the Alpha King in full, and he was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. You have no authority here, human. Nereus moved to place himself between Aldrich and Mira. Leave, before we're forced to kill you. Try. Aldrich's voice was cold, commanding. Then his eyes found Mira's, and they softened. I'm sorry. I should have told you who I was. I was afraid. Afraid that you'd see the crown instead of me. Afraid of losing the only real thing in my life. You lied. Her heart was breaking all over again, the familiar pain of betrayal washing over her. Everything was a lie. Not everything. Not how I feel about you. Not this. He placed a hand over his heart, where she knew the golden threads of their forming bond would be visible to his alpha senses. I've been looking for you my entire life, Mira. I didn't know what I was searching for until I found you. Don't let my stupidity and cowardice destroy what we have. What you have is forbidden. Torin interjected smugly. She'll be executed if she chooses you, human. Your pretty words mean nothing. Aldrich's gaze swung to Torin, and the temperature in the cave seemed to drop. You're the one who rejected her, who scarred her and cast her aside. I made a practical choice. You destroyed something precious because you were too weak to see its value. Aldrich took a step forward, and even the mere warriors tensed at the predatory grace in his movement. And now you're trying to do it again. But I'm not weak, and I won't let you hurt her anymore. This isn't about Torin, Nereus interrupted, though he looked at the other alpha with thinly veiled disgust. This is about law, about protecting our people from yours. Then let's talk about that. Aldrich pulled a sealed document from his cloak. This is a royal decree, signed in my blood and sealed with my authority. It grants full citizenship and protection to any mere person who wishes to live within my kingdom's borders. It establishes a council of both humans and Mer to negotiate peace and trade. It offers reparations for the sins of my ancestors. Stunned silence filled the cave. You would do this? Nereus took the document, examining it carefully. Reform centuries of hostility for one Omega? I would do this because it's right. Because the war between our peoples is ancient history, and holding on to hatred helps no one. Aldrich's eyes never left Mira's. But yes, I'd do far more than this for her. I'd give up my crown if that's what it took. No. The word burst from Mira before she could stop it. Everyone turned to stare at her. No, you don't give up your crown. Your people need you. A good king doesn't abandon his responsibilities for personal desire. Then what do you suggest? Aldrich asked quietly. Because I won't lose you. That's not negotiable. Before Mira could answer, a new commotion erupted from the cave's landward entrance. Marcus burst in, sword drawn, followed by a contingent of royal guards. Sire, Lord Castellan is approaching with armed forces. He knows about... Marcus stopped short, finally noticing the mere warriors. By the gods. How many men? Aldrich demanded, immediately shifting into command mode. 50, maybe more. They're armed for battle, not escort. Marcus kept his sword up, eyeing the mere warriors warily. Castellan is declaring you unfit to rule. Something about being ensorcelled by sea demons. Convenient timing, Torin muttered. And for once Mira agreed with him. Nereus's eyes narrowed. This is a trap. He wants to provoke a conflict between our peoples, using you two as the catalyst. If he attacks while we're here, one of the mere warriors added grimly, it will look like we ambushed the king. The fragile peace between our peoples shatters, and we're back to war. Aldrich's jaw clenched. Then we don't give him that satisfaction. Captain Nereus, if I may suggest an alliance, however temporary. Your warriors and my guards, working together to repel Castellan's forces. You would trust us at your back? I'm trusting you with far more than my back. Aldrich glanced at Mira. I'm trusting you with my heart and my future. What's a little tactical cooperation compared to that? Despite everything, Mira felt a laugh bubble up. Even in crisis, he could make her want to smile. Damn him. Nereus considered for a long moment, then nodded sharply. Agreed. But this doesn't resolve the question of you and the Omega. One crisis at a time, Aldrich replied. First we survive, then we negotiate. The sound of marching feet echoed from outside. Castellan's voice rang out, amplified by what sounded like a speaking horn. King Aldrich, emerge from that cave and face judgment for your crimes against humanity. You've consorted with sea demons, betrayed your people, and proven yourself unfit to rule. That's my cue. Aldrich straightened, his hand moving to his sword. Then he looked at Mira, and she saw naked vulnerability in his eyes. If I don't survive this, don't. She moved to him without thinking, her hand finding his. Don't you dare say goodbye. We fight together, or we don't fight at all. You don't have legs. How? She concentrated, and felt the familiar painful shift as her tail split and reformed into legs. The transformation was exhausting, something she could only maintain for a few hours at most, but it was worth it to see the surprise and admiration in his eyes. I'm not helpless, Your Majesty, and I'm not letting you face this alone. Something fierce and possessive flared in his gaze. When this is over, we're going to have a very long discussion about that word you just used. Majesty? Alone. Heat flooded her cheeks even as terror gripped her heart. Survive first, flirt later. Deal. What followed was chaos. Aldrich emerged from the cave with Mira at his side, presenting a united front that made Castellan's forces pause. Behind them, visible in the cave's opening, stood both mere warriors and human guards, an impossible alliance that no one could have predicted. Lord Castellan, Aldrich's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You come armed into my presence without summons. That's treason. You've been compromised by sea demons. Castellan gestured wildly at Mira. Look at her. She's bewitched you, stolen your will. We're here to save you, my king. I need no saving. What I need is for you to stand down before you start a war we cannot afford. The creature must die. Castellan drew his sword. Kill her, and you'll be freed from the spell. The only spell I'm under, Aldrich said coldly, is called love, and I'd rather die than be freed from it. Mira's heart stuttered at the words. He loved her. Despite everything, despite the impossibility of it all, he loved her. Castellan snarled in frustration and raised his sword. Then you die a traitor! Attack! His forces surged forward, but so did the Mer warriors, erupting from the water with a speed and ferocity that caught the humans off guard. Nereus's trident flashed in the moonlight, disarming 3 men before they could even raise their swords. The cave became a maelstrom of battle. Mira fought alongside Aldrich, using the combat training all mere children received. She was weaker on land, her movements slower, but desperation and determination fueled her. When one of Castellan's men came at Aldrich from behind, she threw herself into the attack, taking a blow meant for the king across her ribs. Pain exploded through her side, but she barely felt it. All that mattered was keeping him safe. Mira! Aldrich caught her as she stumbled, his face contorted with rage and fear. The alpha in him surged to the surface, and suddenly he was fighting with a ferocity that drove back everyone around them. Don't you dare! Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for me. Too late, she gasped, pressing a hand to her bleeding side. Already did. In the ocean, remember? That's not funny. Little bit funny. Despite the pain and the battle and the impossibility of their situation, she saw love blazing in his eyes. Pure, unconditional love that asked nothing but gave everything. Maybe Torin had been right about one thing. She had been flawed, but not in the way he'd thought. Her flaw had been believing herself unworthy of this kind of love. A horn blast cut through the chaos, not from Castellan's forces, but from down the beach. Reinforcements. Mira's heart sank. They were already outnumbered. More enemies would be the end of them. But the figures that appeared weren't soldiers. They were merfolk, hundreds of them, emerging from the water with Elder Cassandra at their head. The ancient mare woman moved slowly but deliberately toward the battlefield. Enough, her voice, amplified by some mare magic, silenced everyone. Even Castellan's forces paused, staring at the impossible sight of an army rising from the sea. This ends now. Nereus swam forward to meet her. Elder Cassandra, what are you doing here? Preventing a catastrophe. She turned her gaze on Aldrich and Mira, still intertwined, his arms supporting her injured form. I've been watching, listening, learning, and I've made a decision. Elder Cassandra's ancient eyes swept over the assembled forces, human and mer, ally and enemy, with an authority that even Aldrich's kingship couldn't match. She had seen centuries pass, had guided the mer clans through countless crises. When she spoke, everyone listened. 50 years ago, our peoples went to war. Hundreds died on both sides. We retreated to the depths, swearing never to trust the surface again. She moved closer to where Aldrich held Mira. But hatred is a poor foundation for a civilization. It festers, it poisons, it destroys us from within. They're monsters, Castellan shouted, though his voice lacked conviction now, faced with an army of merfolk. They'll destroy us. We could, Cassandra agreed mildly, just as you could destroy us, given time and enough hatred. Or, she gestured to Aldrich and Mira, we could choose a different path. She reached out, her wizened hand tracing the air between the king and the Omega. Mira gasped as the golden threads of their bond suddenly became visible to everyone, shimmering, beautiful, undeniable. A true mate bond, Cassandra announced, between human alpha and mer omega, something I've never seen in all my long years. Perhaps the gods are wiser than we are. Perhaps they're showing us a bridge between our worlds. She's a reject, Torin protested. Damaged goods. She can't represent our people. She represents hope. Cassandra cut him off sharply. And you, Torin, represent everything that's wrong with our pride and our prejudice. The Omega was never damaged. You were simply too blind to see her worth. She turned back to Aldrich. King of the Northern Realm, you offer peace. But peace requires sacrifice from both sides. What are you willing to give? Aldrich didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes. My crown, my kingdom, my life. No. Mira found her voice despite the pain. Stop offering to give up your crown. Your people need a king. She looked up at him, at this impossible man who loved her despite every reason not to. But they need a king who can bridge two worlds, who can see beyond old hatreds. What are you suggesting? Cassandra asked, a glimmer of approval in her ancient eyes. Mira took a deep breath, an idea crystallizing. A union, not just between us, but between our peoples. Aldrich remains king, but he takes a merqueen, someone who can speak for both land and sea, someone who can ensure neither side betrays the other. You, Aldrich breathed. You're talking about you. I'm exiled anyway, have nothing to lose. But if I did this, if I bonded with you officially, as your queen, it would force both our peoples to cooperate, to communicate, to try. It would also paint a target on your back, Nereus pointed out, from those who oppose peace on both sides. Then I'll have to survive. Mira managed a weak smile. I'm good at surviving. Cassandra studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. A bold solution, unprecedented, dangerous. A smile creased her ancient face. I approve, but the choice must be theirs, freely made. King Aldrich, will you take this Omega as your mate and queen, knowing it will challenge everything your people believe about the mirror? Yes. No hesitation, no doubt. 1,000 times yes. And Mira, will you bond with this alpha, leave the depths you've hidden in, and face a world that may never fully accept you? Mira looked at Aldrich, at his storm-gray eyes full of love and promise, at the golden threads already binding them together, at the future they could build if they were brave enough. She'd been living in the shadows for so long, hiding from pain and possibility alike. Maybe it was time to step into the light. "Yes," she whispered. "I will." Cassandra raised her hands, and her voice rang with power. "Then let it be done. Let this bond be witnessed by ocean and sky, by mer and human alike, and let any who would break it face the wrath of both our peoples." The golden threads between them flared brilliant and bright, the mate bond snapping into place with a completeness that stole Mira's breath. She felt Aldrich's love, his determination, his absolute certainty that they would make this work. And through the bond, she knew he felt her fear and hope and desperate, terrifying love in return. Castellan made one last desperate move, lunging forward with his sword raised. But he was stopped not by guards or warriors, but by his own men, who disarmed him and forced him to his knees. "Enough, Castellan," Marcus said firmly. "You've lost. Accept it with grace." The would-be traitor slumped in defeat, and Mira felt a wave of relief. It was over. They'd survived. Aldrich pulled her closer, mindful of her injury, and pressed his forehead to hers in the gesture that had become theirs. "No more shadows," he murmured. "No more lies," she agreed. "No more running. No more hiding." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and she tasted salt water and promise, and the beginning of something impossible and beautiful. When they finally broke apart, Nereus was organizing the mare warriors to return to the depths, and Marcus was seeing to Castellan's imprisonment. Elder Cassandra watched it all with satisfaction. "You have much work ahead of you," the elder told them. "A kingdom to unite, a people to win over, traditions to navigate. It won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," Aldrich replied, his arm secure around Mira's waist. "Good answer." Cassandra began to turn away, then paused. "Oh, and Mira, your exile is lifted. Your clan once more if you wish it, though I suspect you'll be too busy being queen to visit often." Tears pricked Mira's eyes. "Thank you, Elder. Thank you. For being brave enough to love when it would have been safer to hide. For choosing light over shadow." The ancient mirror smiled. "May your bond be blessed with joy and many years." As Cassandra disappeared into the waves, Mira leaned into Aldrich's embrace, finally allowing herself to believe this was real, that she was safe, that she was loved. "Ready to be queen?" Aldrich asked softly. "Terrified," she admitted. "But with you, I can face anything. Even court politics? Let's not get crazy." His laugh rumbled through his chest, and she felt it through their bond like music. Above them, the stars wheeled through a clearing sky, and the ocean whispered against the shore. No longer a barrier between two worlds, but a bridge. Mira had lived in the shadows for so long, her heart scarred and her soul wounded. But shadows couldn't exist where there was light. And Aldrich was her son. Together they would illuminate the darkness, heal the rifts between their peoples, and prove that love, real, true, mate-bond love, could conquer even the deepest scars. The story of the Omega Queen and her Alpha King was just beginning, and it would be legendary.